Hey, good morning, everybody. This is Saturday morning, June 25th, 2022, and I wanted to talk a little bit about regression testing. The reason I brought this up is that in the last few weeks, if any of you have been following the issue with Microsoft, there was a particular feature set or advancement that Microsoft was making in their MS Teams product or service. Microsoft Teams, they were doing something to add features that apparently the customers had asked for. And when they did that, something else broke in Microsoft Teams. In other words, we added capability here, but we lost capability here. And because Microsoft Teams is so broadly used, it literally Microsoft about 3 weeks to get everything fixed and back to normal. It wasn't a fast fix. It was they may have done the fix, but then it took them weeks to deploy it. Because I don't know if you know, but Microsoft Teams, I think now, Chris, Microsoft Teams is being deployed as a software as a service. In other words, Microsoft owns it. And
That's,
it just
sorry to
brings
interrupt.
it down.
Sorry to interrupt. That's true for most Microsoft applications, by the way.
Yeah.
They have gone to software as a service model.
Yep. So I wanted to bring up the discussion of regression testing and why it can be such a challenge from a security standpoint. And the reason why security has to even be concerned. So I wanted to share a little bit about what is regression testing. A lot of people may not know what regression testing is, even in the cybersecurity career field. And why is it valuable? Why is it dangerous? In other words, what's the good part about regression testing and what's the bad part? So this is from the web, but it basically says that regression testing is part of software testing. And it says it ensures an application still functions after any code changes, updates, or improvements. Regression testing is responsible for the overall stability and function of the existing features. In other words, let's say let's talk Log4j. That's a really good one. Log4j came out, and years later, somebody found a vulnerability in Log4j. They had come up with a later version of Log4j. I think it was from 15 to 16, but it allowed for certain features to be enabled that caused the advancement to still contain vulnerabilities. So there were, 2 or 3, Chris, successive upgrades to Log4j where they had Log4j, the new stuff. The old stuff had the vulnerability. Log4j, the new stuff, could be set in such a manner that the vulnerability still existed. So they had to come out with Log4j, I think it's version 17. So when they did the Log4j upgrade, they did not properly allow for people to set it wrong and therefore extend that vulnerability. So, regression testing, if you are the provider of a software patch or code or application or anything, you are responsible for what happens when people use it, as well as what happens when people misuse it. If you deliver the app, you're responsible for what that app does. I'll give a really good example. About public Wi-Fi. Public Wi-Fi, if you go into your local, Walmart, they have Walmart public Wi-Fi. If you get on the Walmart public Wi-Fi, you have to click on something that says, I agree to your terms of service. You've seen that. The challenge, the reason why that's there is that there is actually a law on the books that says if you are a provider of a service that people misuse, you are also responsible for the output of that misuse. I don't know if you've seen that, Chris, but go ahead.
It's a CISSP topic of due diligence and due care.
Okay, very, very good. So if you are, let's say, a provider of public Wi-Fi, and you just say, click on this and, public Wi-Fi, no terms of service or end user agreement or anything like that. If somebody gets on your Wi-Fi and goes and hacks the DoD, you can be held culpable for their actions because you provided the service that they used incorrectly. So same thing with code changes, updates, software improvements, same thing occurs. If you do an upgrade and somebody misuses it to go out and hack the Pentagon, you are responsible for that. Partly. Not fully, but partly responsible. And you can be sued. So when you are doing regression testing, here's a quick example of the regression loop of regression testing. You notice it starts with the software, and this is either the original software release or any upgrades or patches. If you are just doing full software release, you do the software build, test and maintenance, and then ship it. But then what happens if somebody comes up and says, oh, by the way, this turns off my TCP/IP? Well, then you identify the need for your software to become updated somehow or another. Then you set the requirements. How are we going to make this work? And they talk about start point and end point. Usually within code, you're going to be modifying a portion of the code, but not the entire code. So the start point and end point refer to your code from here to here, but not up here and not down here. So this is what we're going to work on. The challenge when you do that, and this is why regression testing is so important, you have to test for not only your original test case. It turns the screen blue, so let's make it to where it doesn't turn the screen blue. But then, oh, by the way, you didn't expect this, but it turns the screen pink. Well, it doesn't turn the screen blue. Are we successful? And the answer is no. So regression testing, you have to take into account not only your intended change and benefits from it, but the result of the changes in anything else that uses that code. And that's why Log4j was such a challenge. So start point, end point, testing and maintenance, and then ship. This is the regression testing loop. And it's a real challenge because you have to test for every condition. And from a security standpoint, you have to remember that if somebody does an upgrade, any patch, that means that their service has changed. It could be Microsoft Office. It could be Adobe. It could be anything. The issue is if the software changes, that means that all of the security conditions for that software have to be retested. You have to retest because the software is no longer what it was the last time you tested. It's had upgrades. So this is my, Calvin and Hobbes, IT according to Calvin and Hobbes. You see him running to catch a bug, and he's like, okay, great. And he goes and he puts the bug outside. At the same time, more bugs are flying in than the one he put out. And that is true in regression testing. That is what occurred with Microsoft. They went to add particular features, and they broke other features that already existed. They stopped working. So Microsoft had to scramble to fix it. They did not do full regression testing. They did not test their upgrade for every condition within the Microsoft Teams service. So that's the challenge with regression testing. From a security standpoint, I guess the best practice that, and I put this on our Facebook page, the best practice is to always remember that when the software changes, your conditions for testing it for security also change. So it's like, well, we already tested that. Yes, but they patched it. Now we have to test again to make sure no new vulnerabilities have been introduced. So, Chris, do you have anything? I mean, it's a really stop and go sort of situation, but from a security standpoint, always remember that what worked yesterday does not mean it'll work today if they've modified the code.
I would provide a suggestion, and I'm kind of looking around in my research to see if it's in a NIST publication somewhere, but this is for any businesses, that every major update, when you go from version 1 to version 2, you should do a testing process, or at least certify that the software is a acceptable risk enough to run on your network as a enterprise business. So I would provide that suggestion to any group. I'm actually going to see if I can find it in the PIS controls or any other controls around, saying that you should probably test your software or patch your software. It's probably part of the patching update process.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I know that for our change management process, there are 2 gateways that have to be fulfilled by different people. In other words, you say, I want to upgrade my servers, my Linux servers. That upgrade passes through both a technical gate, which is typically you as the SME saying, I'm going to move my Linux servers from version 12 to version 13. You say, easy thing. But then the second gate that has to be passed before you can deploy is a security gate. And what happens is someone from the security team has to evaluate your change and say, does it meet with security expectations? Does it introduce any new vulnerabilities? Typically what they do is they will do security scans on one item to see if it passes the security scans. If that works, then you can deploy it on all of them.
Scotty, a mentee question, and I think the mentees will be thinking this question. What can I study? What can I learn? What can I practice hands-on with testing and regression testing to get myself prepared for those interviews about regression testing, or maybe if I need to manage a software program, for example?
Very good question, and this is in the Security Plus study guide. I looked at it this morning. You are required to understand about what's called the Sdlc, Software Development Lifecycle. How is software developed? How is software updated? And why do I care as a security professional? I basically described what if something goes wrong, but there is a part to play in security. So from a Security Plus standpoint, you should know what the software development lifecycle is and how it works. Whether you're using Agile, whether you're using Waterfall, all those things will likely be in your Security Plus exam. So that's a good place to start, and understand a little bit about code. You don't need to know code, but you do need to know how code works. And the fact that, like I said, if you introduce new features by changing the code, you have changed the code. The whole code needs to be retested, and not just this feature. Like if I turn the blue off on the screen, but it makes the screen turn pink, I achieved what I started to do, but I introduced something new. So you always have to be aware that that occurs with code testing, code patches, and make sure that security is engaged in any patching and update cycle at the beginning to test it before anything new is introduced, and also operationally, you have to conduct routine scans for something that missed your change management process, because those occur as well. Does that help, Chris?
It does help, yep. Another question. I'm a small business owner, or I'm a personal user of my computer. Should I be concerned about what software is on my computer with this testing, and what can the user use for the testing? What should they need to know about regression testing besides what's on your slides?
Very good question. This is where you get into the hazard, and I will call it the risk, of being an early adopter. When, let's say and this isn't an iPhone, but let's say I had an iPhone and Apple announces a brand new code, we're updating to version 15.0. Why is it, and you've probably seen this, why is it that they tell everybody upgrade to 15.0, and then 2 weeks later they say, oh, here's 15.1? Because early adopters fall into the trap of being the early testers of something as well. If a developer doesn't fully regression test their software, like the OS upgrades for your Apple iPhone or iPad or whatever, then they use their customers as test cases to say, oops, it inverted my screen, or oops, whatever occurred, I can't connect to my Wi-Fi or whatever. So you have to gauge whether it's a good idea to implement something the moment it's announced. And that literally comes down to how well do you trust the developers of that particular software. When, for example, when I see a major code update means solid numbers. If you see an integer from 13 to 14, from 2 to 3, anything like that, if it's 2.7 to 2.76, those are usually very minor incremental updates. But if you see something that goes from 2 to 3, that's called a major upgrade, and it usually has the greatest possibility of error. So watch for the code numbers. If they say we're going from 14.7 to 14.8, I consider that to be no big deal. I will apply that patch immediately. But as soon as they say we're going to 15.0, those numbers mean something. And when it's a major step, what I do is I will wait a week. Unless it's security related. If they say you gotta update, then I do. But if they say we're just upgrading to like version 15.0, I will wait a week and see if they announce 15.01 or 15.1 or whatever. I've seen it too many times to fall for it. Major code updates, when it goes from an integer, version 42 to version 43. If you see the number and it's not a dot something, be suspicious. Consider waiting a little while longer before you actually apply the update. Again, unless they say this solves major security issues. But for minor numbers, .2 to .3 or .4, no big deal. I will apply those immediately. Make sense?
Makes sense, yep.
So, for example, I think I have something here where I was looking for updates on this particular software, free conference call. It's version 5.2.2491. And before that, it was 5.2.2488. No big deal. And before that, it was 5.2.2487. Little tiny fixes. Oh, well, we made it to where the Chinese version doesn't invert the screen, or something like that. Or we added capability for certain wireless headsets, or those sorts of things. They're doing very tiny updates within the code, very unlikely to cause security issues. But if it's like from 52 to 53, watch out. That's where there's a capability of higher capability of error and security issues. Make sense?
Makes sense, yep.
Okay, cool. Hey, Harminder, good morning. Good to see
Harminder.
you. All right, I'm going to turn the recording off because I think we're done. Do you have anything for the team, Chris?
Not at this time. I told you earlier before recording what was going on with me, so.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Thanks, everybody, and we will talk later. We had a short session today, but I hope everybody got something out of it. And, please, like they always say, like, share, and subscribe. All right.